There we go, nice and comfy. Hello guys, how's it going? I hope you're all keeping well today. Bit of a change of scenery now, just sitting in the living room on the recliner. As you can see, we've been doing a lot of work on the living room. We've had it all nicely painted, everything's looking well. But I just thought I would come down, chill here for a wee bit. So for today's video, I wanted to put side by side and give my own personal stories, personal time of owning these two lenses. Now they're the exact same focal length, that's the one thing I'll talk about. But I wanted to put them side by side and share my own personal opinion about them. So we have the Samyang 35mm f2.8 for the FE Sony mount, against the 35mm f1.4 for the same mount FE Sony. 35-2.8, as you will see in the top right hand corner, did a review of about last year. I've owned that for about a year now, been really happy with it, whereas I've owned the 35-1.4 for just a couple of months now. I won that in a competition from Samyang, so thank you very much for letting me win that competition, but that by no means that Samyang are the sponsor of this video or anything like that. This is just a full honest video about my own opinions of owning these two lenses. I'm not going to be doing full in-depth analysis of these lenses like edge to edge sharpness and all that jargon. I just more wanted to talk about little bits and pieces about the lenses that can help you out, but more about my time of owning these two lenses and what my own personal opinion about them has been. So we'll start off with the weigh-in. This is the 35mm f2.8, and you'll have seen again from that review, I do love this lens. I've owned this lens for just over a year now, and it's just so handy to have in the camera bag because, as you can see, it's nice and small, it's nice and lightweight. It's essentially a pancake lens for the Sony cameras, which you don't see too often, especially with the full frame mounts. So if you're a street photographer, if you travel all over the world, all those sorts of things. For me, with the gigs, I'm traveling to so many different venues and all that. This just makes life so much handier because it doesn't take up that much room in the bag. And especially since it's going on to a mirrorless camera. Mirrorless was all about compactness, lightweight as well. This just corresponds really well with a mirrorless camera because it's just so lightweight, so compact, you'll barely even notice it when you're carrying the camera around. Price, this is quite an inexpensive lens, only costing about £270, 270, 280 give or take, whereas compared to the Sony equivalent, you're going up into the £600 territory. Now, while this, it's good to have a nice, cheap, affordable lens, cheap, well started to show. Like the one thing I talked about in the review was the fact that this lens is, you can tell it is built very cheaply. Like it's all very plasticky. You also have a very plastic mount as well. It's not weather sealed or anything, but what do you expect from a 270 odd pound lens? You're not exactly going to get, top-notch quality from that, but that being said, this lens has lasted me a good long while. It's done its fair share of being knocked around in my camera bag, so it has, and it's still looking in pretty excellent condition. So that was the one downside I let on about this lens in my review, was more about the build quality. Now compared to the other lens that I'm going to talk about very shortly, I do find that this lens hunts around a good fair bit more. Daytime, all those sorts of things, it's fine. But for the lower light conditions, there was a lot of times it just wasn't too sure. But once it did get locked on, it was fantastically sharp, all those different things. Plus as well, the one thing that I really didn't like about having a lens this small is that for me as a Sony user, I mostly use the DMF setting, which is dynamic manual focus, which essentially combines both automatic focus and manual focus. Having a lens at that sort of size against my camera body, I find there's loads of times because the manual ring is so close to the camera, I was knocking against that manual ring all the time and it was just knocking my focus. Plus as well, when I'm doing manual focus, I turn on the option to magnify in just to make sure everything is all nicely sharp. Combine that with the amount of times I knock into this lens and all I'm just getting is this screen all the time in my face, which is quite distracting, especially when you're at a gig where you're working at a bit more of a faster pace and you're getting everything all lined up. You think everything is nice and in focus, but then it just, you just get thrown off because of those screens coming up and all that. So that's again one of the downsides I have about this lens. It's just too small for me. That could just be my own fault because I have pretty big lanky fingers, and again, working with that faster pace, I'm constantly knocking against things and all that. All in all, for a pancake lens, I do love this. Like recently I was in Glasgow, took the A7 Mark I and only this lens, and it just took up no room in the camera bag. So for traveling around, if you're a street photographer, like I said, all those different things, this is perfect. And especially with an f2.8 aperture, you'll probably find that's more than enough compared to this guy. So this is the 35mm f1.4. Now we have a much different aperture on here. We're letting in a lot more light this way. So it's an f1.4. So this lens would be ideal if you're a portrait photographer, wedding photographer, all those sorts of things, to get all that nice blur out background, all that stunning bokeh as well. As you can see with this lens compared to the other one, there's a big difference. Yep, that's right. This lens is a lot bigger and it's a lot bulkier, especially whenever we add the lens hood on. Just look at the size of that compared to this guy. That's the price you pay for having this type of focal length with that type of aperture. I mean, when you go online and you see the likes of, there's a Sigma Art series of this lens and there is the Sony version as well. They're basically exact same sort of sizes, sort of weights as well. But where the size is concerned, what baffles me about this lens is I'll sit and pick up my camera for the first time and I'll sit and go, oh, this is just such a big, bulky lens. But the more I carried my camera about with this lens, the more I actually got used to it and the more I actually grew to be more comfortable with it. It's a little bit too big for the A7 Mark I, but if you have like an A7 Mark II or an A7 III, those type of cameras, this lens is ideal for that because of the bigger grip on there. So you do start to feel a little bit more comfortable with this guy. Now compared to the other lens, this lens is certainly a lot more expensive. You're going up into the sort of £400-500 mark. There is a big difference in the quality. So although it's plastic, it's a lot more heavier quality. We have a metal ring mount on there as well. Better quality of glass on here. So there is a big difference in quality compared to the pancake lens. But that by no means means that it's weather sealed or anything like that. It doesn't have stabilization in it, but if you have an A7 II or an A7 III, you've got your built-in stabilization there already. So it's, not a big thing that way. Now where the autofocus is concerned, the pancake one, as I said already, did find it hunts around a good fair bit more in lower light, but once it did lock on, it was pretty sharp. Whereas this lens has no problem in low light conditions. I've had this out at a couple of gigs, which I'm constantly showing pictures throughout this video just to show you as examples, but I've had this out at a couple of gigs here, and although I've had situations where they're a much bigger stage, so the subject is a bit more further away, this just had no problem finding them. Once it did find them, it's sharp. It's an extremely sharp lens. Now, most of the time when I'm at a gig, I'm shooting an f2.8. There's been very little times I've shot with this at f1.4, but the situations that I have done, again, it is still nice and sharp. Now, you do start to find with a cheaper lens and an f1.4, you're going to get a good fair bit of chromatic aberration with this guy, but that's pretty easy to fix in Lightroom. And the autofocus is, again, it is nice and quick, it's nice and fast, it doesn't hunt in low light. It is, the one thing that I do compare against these two lenses is that they are pretty noisy. So if you're wanting to use them for video work or anything like that, they do have a bit of a noise in the autofocus. This one's just a little bit quieter for the video compared to this guy. But if you have an external microphone, it's not exactly the biggest problem of all. But this lens is a little bit more on the noisier side. Even when you're using the camera, you'll hear it just going sort of thing. And of course, as you notice with both these lenses, Samyang just love adding on that little red ring. What is it with camera companies and their red rings and all those sorts of things? Both of them have their pros, both of them have their cons. It's been good putting them side by side, seeing the biggest differences of them all. Like I said about the 35-1.4, once it was on my camera and I was walking around with it for a little bit, I sort of got used to the size. But again, there was just loads of conditions that it was just too big, too bulky. So it was, and especially when I'm putting it into my camera bag, it takes up a good fair bit of room in my bag compared to the little pancake lens, which is nothing. But you want to make sure your camera's not rattling around in the bag or anything like that. Both of them have fantastic quality as well in regards to sharpness. Certainly the 1.4 is just that little bit sharper compared to the 2.8, and it does have that better autofocus system. And also if you put that with the 1.4 aperture, again, ideal for portraiture, weddings, all those different type of things. And whenever you have the likes of your eye autofocus on there, that's just a beast of a lens for that type of photography. So while by no means am I going to sit here and say I prefer this lens or I prefer this lens here, I just wanted to give a side by side on here and give my own opinion of having both these lenses. Hopefully one of these here is going to be ideal for you. I hope this video has been beneficial for you guys, and if you are thinking about these type of lenses, let me know which one in particular you have your eye on, or if you own these lenses currently, let me know which one you have and what do you think of them. Just leave a comment down below, and don't be afraid to like, share and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with any future videos. But until then guys, take care and enjoy the rest of your day.